I was standing in my corner office overlooking Monterey Bay when my phone lit up with a notification I never expected to see. A booking confirmation from Sunset Bay Resort and Spa. The guest name made my heart skip. Rodriguez Family Reservation, Premium Ocean View Suite, 1 week stay. The same resort I had quietly purchased 3 months earlier for $45 million. The same family that told me 7 years ago there wasn't room for me on their dream vacation to this exact location. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Maya Rodriguez, and the people who said I couldn't afford to join them at a luxury resort are about to discover I don't just visit places like this anymore. I own them. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The memory hits me like a wave every time I think about that summer when I turned 18. Our family was gathered around the kitchen table in our riverside home, the same table where we'd shared countless dinners and homework sessions and arguments about curfew. Mom had spread out brochures across the wooden surface, each one more beautiful than the last. Sunset Bay Resort and Spa gleamed from the glossy pages like something from a movie. Infinity pools stretching toward the Pacific Ocean. Spa treatments that cost more than our monthly grocery budget. Golf courses that looked like they belonged in heaven. Dad leaned back in his chair, the same pose he struck whenever he was about to make an announcement that would change everything. He worked as a sales manager at a mid-sized insurance company, and Mom taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school. We weren't poor, but we weren't rich either. We were the kind of family that planned vacations around Groupon deals and off-season rates. This resort was different. This was their dream. 30 years, Dad said, reaching over to squeeze Mom's hand. 30 years of marriage deserve something special. His voice carried that tone of determination that meant he'd already made up his mind about something, probably after weeks of internal debate about whether they could actually afford it. Mom's eyes were bright with excitement as she pointed to different amenities in the brochure. The oceanfront dining room where they served fresh lobster and champagne. The couple's massage packages that included aromatherapy and hot stone treatments. The private balconies where you could watch the sunset paint the sky in colors that would make you believe in magic again. "We've been saving for this," she explained, though I could hear the slight uncertainty in her voice. "Not just for the anniversary, but for a real family vacation. Something we can all remember forever." My heart started beating faster because this sounded like the kind of family trip I'd been dreaming about since middle school. We usually went to Lake Arrowhead for long weekends or took day trips to the beach in San Diego. Nothing like this. Nothing that required plane tickets and resort reservations, and the kind of clothes I'd only seen in magazines. David, my older brother, was already nodding his approval. At 28, he worked in marketing for a tech company in Los Angeles and had just gotten engaged to Amanda, a sweet girl who worked in human resources and never made anyone feel left out. Jessica, my younger sister, was bouncing in her chair with the kind of enthusiasm that only a 22-year-old college senior could muster. She was studying communications at UC Santa Barbara and always talked about wanting to travel the world after graduation. "When would we go?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual even though my mind was already racing ahead to what I'd pack, what I'd wear, how I'd save up for spending money from my part-time job at Chen's family restaurant. Downtown. That's when the energy in the room shifted. Dad and Mom exchanged one of those looks that parents share when they're about to deliver news that's going to hurt. The kind of look that says they've already discussed this privately and reached a conclusion that doesn't include everyone at the table. "Well," Dad started slowly, "that's the thing we need to talk about." Mom jumped in with the voice she used when she was trying to soften bad news for her students. "The resort is expensive, honey. More expensive than we initially realized when we started looking into it." "How expensive?" David asked, though something in his tone suggested he already knew this conversation wasn't going to end with all of us packing our bags. Dad pulled out a calculator and started running numbers out loud. The suite they wanted was $800 per night. With taxes and resort fees, they were looking at over $1,000 daily just for accommodation. Then there were flights from Ontario Airport to Monterey, rental car costs, meals that weren't included in the room rate, and all the activities they wanted to try. For 1 week, we're talking about $12,000 minimum, he said, and the number hung in the air like something physical we could all touch. I felt my stomach drop because I knew what was coming next. In our family, when money got tight, there was always a hierarchy. David was the oldest, the successful one, the one who was building a career and a future with Amanda. Jessica was the baby, still in college, still needing support and guidance. And me? I was the middle child who was supposed to understand, supposed to be mature, supposed to make sacrifices for the greater good. We can afford to take 5 people, Mom continued gently. David and Amanda, Jessica, and the 2 of us. The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. I looked around the table, waiting for someone to say something, to suggest a solution, to fight for me the way I would have fought for any of them. But David was studying his hands, and Jessica was staring at the brochures like they might magically produce extra money. "What about Maya?" Jessica finally asked, and I felt a rush of gratitude toward my little sister that I hadn't expected. "Maya's graduating high school next month," Dad said, as if that explained everything. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She's going to UC San Diego in the fall. She has her whole life ahead of her. There will be other vacations. Other vacations. The phrase felt like a slap because we all knew this wasn't true. This wasn't just any vacation. This was their anniversary. Trip. Their once-in-a-lifetime splurge. Their chance to experience the kind of luxury they'd worked 30 years to afford. There wouldn't be other vacations like this one. Besides, Mom added, trying to inject some optimism into her voice, you'll probably be busy with graduation parties and getting ready for college. You might not even want to spend a week with your boring old family anyway. But I did want to. I wanted it more than I'd wanted anything in a long time. I wanted to sit on that private balcony and watch the sunset with people I loved. I wanted to try the spa treatments and eat fresh lobster and take pictures that would make my college friends jealous. I wanted to be part of the family memory they were creating, not the footnote who got left behind. I could get a job this summer, I offered desperately. I could help pay for my portion. Mrs. Chen said she'd give me more hours at the restaurant. Dad shook his head before I'd even finished speaking. Honey, even if you worked 40 hours a week all summer, you wouldn't make enough to cover your share. And we need to book this soon if we want the dates we want. The conversation continued around me, but I stopped really listening. They talked about flight times and packing lists and dinner reservations like the decision had already been made. Like my presence or absence was just a minor detail to work around. David mentioned how excited Amanda was about the couple's massage. Jessica wondered if the resort had a good fitness center. Mom started planning what she'd wear to the fancy restaurant. I excused myself quietly and went to my room, closing the door behind me with the kind of careful control that meant I was trying not to slam it. My bedroom was small but comfortable, decorated with posters from movies I loved and photos of friends from high school. Everything was familiar and safe, but suddenly it felt like a cage. I sat on my bed and stared at the acceptance letter from UC San Diego that was still pinned to my bulletin board. Full scholarship for academic merit, plus work-study opportunities to help with living expenses. I'd been so proud when that letter arrived, so excited about starting fresh somewhere new. Now it felt like my escape hatch from a family that could easily function without me. The next few weeks passed in a blur of graduation preparations and family vacation planning that I wasn't part of. I watched them research restaurants and book spa appointments and argue about whether to rent a car or use ride services. I heard Mom on the phone with Amanda, coordinating what they'd pack and planning which activities they'd do together. I listened to Jessica practice her photography skills because she wanted to capture every moment of their luxury week. And through it all, nobody asked how I felt about being left behind. Nobody suggested alternative solutions or compromises. Nobody seemed to notice that their daughter and sister was being excluded from what they kept calling the family trip of a lifetime. 3 days before they left, I was working my evening shift at Chen's family restaurant when Mrs. Chen approached me during the dinner rush. She was a small woman in her 60s who had immigrated from Taiwan 30 years earlier and built her restaurant from nothing into a local institution. She worked harder than anyone I knew and never complained about the long hours or difficult customers. "Maya," she said, wiping her hands on her apron, "you seem sad lately. Everything okay at home?" I hadn't planned to tell anyone about the vacation situation, but something about Mrs. Chen's genuine concern broke down my defenses. Maybe it was the way she always remembered to ask about my grades and my college plans. Maybe it was how she'd given me my first job when I was 16 and needed to start saving money for school. Or maybe it was simply that she was the first adult in weeks who seemed to notice that something was wrong. "My family is going on this amazing vacation next week," I said, trying to keep my voice steady as I folded napkins. "To this beautiful resort in Monterey Bay. It's for my parents' anniversary." "That sounds wonderful," Mrs. Chen said. "You must be excited." "I'm not going," I admitted quietly. "They said they could only afford to take 5 people, and I'm the one who got cut." Mrs. Chen stopped what she was doing and looked at me, with the kind of expression that meant she was really listening, really thinking about what I'd just said. She didn't immediately offer platitudes about how everything happens for a reason, or how I'd understand when I was older. She just absorbed the information and let me feel whatever I was feeling about it. "That must hurt," she said finally. "Being left out of something important to your family." The simplicity of her response, the way she acknowledged my pain without trying to fix it or explain it away, made my eyes fill with tears I'd been holding back for weeks. "I know they can't afford to take everyone," I said quickly. "I understand the money situation. It just feels like I'm the expendable one, you know? Like everyone else's presence matters more than mine." Mrs. Chen nodded slowly. "Sometimes the people who love us make decisions that hurt us without meaning to. Sometimes they think they're protecting us when they're actually excluding us. And sometimes," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "we have to decide what we're going to do with that hurt." "What do you mean?" "You can let it make you bitter, or you can let it make you stronger. You can let it convince you that you don't matter, or you can let it motivate you to build a life where you never have to depend on other people's choices to determine your worth." Her words stayed with me through my last day of high school, through graduation weekend when my family was rushing around getting ready to leave. I watched them pack expensive resort clothes and research local attractions and count down the pie. Days until their departure like excited children. And I made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I was going to prove that I didn't need their vacation to have an amazing summer. I was going to work extra shifts at the restaurant, save every penny I could, and start building something that belonged entirely to me. I didn't know what that something would be yet, but I knew it would be mine in a way that family dinners and shared vacations never could be. The morning they left for the airport, I hugged everyone goodbye and wished them a wonderful trip. I meant it mostly. I wanted them to have fun and make beautiful memories and celebrate 30 years of marriage in style. But I also wanted them to miss me. I wanted them to notice my absence in the sunset photos and the fancy dinner conversations and the lazy poolside afternoons. David's last words to me were, "Don't get into too much trouble while we're gone." Jessica promised to bring me back something special from the gift shop. Mom reminded me to call if I needed anything and left emergency contact numbers on the Refrigerator. Dad handed me $100 for groceries and gas, with the kind of guilty expression that suggested he knew money wasn't really the issue here. And then they were gone, and I was alone in our house for the first time in my life. The silence felt enormous and strange, but also full of possibility. I had 7 days to figure out who I was when I wasn't playing the role of understanding. Middle child, accommodating sister, good daughter who didn't make waves. I started by calling Mrs. Chen and asking if she needed extra help at the restaurant that week. She said yes immediately, almost like she'd been expecting my call. I worked double shifts Monday through Friday, learning parts of the business I'd never seen before. Mrs. Chen taught me how to manage inventory and handle vendor relationships and calculate food costs. She showed me the spreadsheets where she tracked daily sales and monthly expenses and yearly profit margins. Running a restaurant is like running any business, she explained one evening as we closed up together. You have to understand your numbers, know your customers, and always be thinking 3 steps ahead. I absorbed everything she taught me like a sponge. During my breaks, I researched the hospitality industry online, reading articles about hotel management and resort operations, and customer service excellence. I learned about RevPAR and occupancy rates and guest satisfaction scores. I studied successful hotel chains and boutique resorts and vacation rental platforms. By the end of the week, I had earned nearly $600 in wages and tips. But more importantly, I had discovered something that felt like a calling. The hospitality industry wasn't just about luxury and glamour. It was about creating experiences that mattered to people, about understanding what guests needed before they knew they needed it, about building businesses that could scale and grow and adapt to changing markets. When my family returned from Sunset Bay Resort, they were glowing with satisfaction and full of stories about their incredible week. They showed me hundreds of photos of oceanfront dinners and spa treatments and golf games and sunset cocktails. They described the impeccable service and the stunning views and the way the resort staff anticipated their every need. You would have loved the restaurants, Mom said, scrolling through pictures on her phone. They had this amazing farm-to-table dinner where everything was sourced locally. The spa was incredible, Jessica added. I've never felt so relaxed in my life. And the business center was actually useful, David mentioned. I was able to get some work done without any stress. They were happy, and I was genuinely glad for them. But I was also different than I'd been before they left. Something had shifted during that week of working extra shifts and learning about business operations and imagining my own future in the hospitality industry. I wasn't the same girl who had sat quietly at the kitchen table and accepted being left behind. It sounds like an amazing trip, I said honestly. I'm glad you all had such a good time. We missed you, Mom said, though something in her tone suggested she was saying it because she thought she should rather than because it was entirely true. We brought you something, Jessica announced, producing a small gift bag with the Sunset Bay Resort logo. Inside was a keychain with a miniature lighthouse and a postcard featuring the resort's signature infinity pool. Nice gifts, thoughtful gifts, but also the kind of gifts you pick up in a hotel lobby when you remember at the last minute that you promised to bring something back for someone. I thanked them and put the keychain on my backpack, where it would remind me every day of the trip I didn't take and the business I was starting to understand. Because during that week alone, I had begun to form a plan that felt both impossible and inevitable. Someday, I was going to own a place like Sunset Bay Resort. Not just visit it as a guest, not just work there as an employee, but own it completely. I was going to create the kind of luxury experience that made families plan anniversary trips and save for years and make memories that lasted forever. And when I did, I was going to make sure that everyone who belonged there was invited to be part of it. I just had to figure out how to get from 18 years old with $600 in savings to successful enough to buy a $45 million resort. It seemed impossible, but then again, so had getting a full scholarship to UC San Diego. So had working my way up from washing dishes to helping manage inventory at Mrs. Chen's restaurant. So had surviving a week alone and discovering that I didn't need other people to validate my worth. As I lay in my childhood bedroom that night, listening to my family share more stories from their luxury vacation downstairs, I made myself a promise. This would be the last time I let other people's financial limitations determine what I could or couldn't do. This would be the last time I accepted being the expendable one, the understanding one, the one who made sacrifices for everyone else's happiness. From now on, I was going to build a life where I made my own decisions about where I went and who I included and how I spent my time and money. It would take years, maybe decades, but I was patient. I was motivated. And I was just getting started. The lighthouse keychain caught the moonlight from my window, and I smiled. They thought they were bringing me a souvenir from their dream, vacation. But actually, they had brought me the symbol of my future empire. The acceptance letter to UC San Diego arrived in May, but it wasn't until I actually stepped onto campus in September that I understood what starting over really meant. Everything was different from Riverside. The ocean breeze carried salt and possibility instead of the dry heat I'd grown up with. Students walked around with a confidence I'd never seen before, talking about internships at tech companies and startup ideas, and study abroad programs like these were normal expectations rather than impossible dreams. My dorm room was smaller than my bedroom back home, but it felt infinite with potential. I shared it with a girl named Rachel from Portland, whose parents were both doctors and who had never worked a paying job in her life. She was sweet and well-meaning, but our conversations often highlighted the gap between my world and hers. "My dad says college is for exploring your passions," she told me during our first week, as she unpacked clothes that still had department store tags. "He wants me to try everything and not worry about practical stuff until after graduation." I nodded and smiled while mentally calculating how many hours I'd need to work at my campus dining hall job to afford textbooks. Rachel's dad might want her to explore her passions, but my passion for the hospitality industry was going to have to wait until I could afford to explore it properly. The dining hall job was my lifeline, and my education rolled into one. I worked breakfast shifts before my morning classes, which meant waking up at 5:30 every day to prep coffee stations and restock pastry displays. The work was repetitive and often thankless, but it paid $8 an hour plus meal credits, and more importantly, it taught me how large-scale food service actually operated. Within a month, I was asking questions that surprised my supervisor, a tired graduate student named Marcus who was working his way through a master's program in business administration. I wanted to understand why certain items sold better at different times of day, how they calculated portion costs, why some suppliers were preferred over others. "You know this is just a campus dining hall, right?" Marcus said one morning as I helped him count inventory. "You're asking questions like you're planning to revolutionize the entire food service industry." "Maybe I am," I replied, and something in my tone made him look at me more carefully. Marcus became my first real mentor in college, though neither of us called it that at the time. He had grown up in San Diego, worked his way through undergrad at UC San Diego, and was now pursuing his MBA while managing dining operations to pay for it. His parents had immigrated from Mexico when he was 10, and he understood what it meant to build something from nothing. "You want to learn about hospitality?" he asked, after I'd been working for him for 2 months. "I've got a friend who manages operations at a boutique hotel downtown. They sometimes need weekend help for events and conferences." The hotel was called the Meridian, a converted historic building near the Gaslamp Quarter with 48 rooms and a rooftop bar that attracted both locals and tourists. It wasn't as luxurious as Sunset Bay Resort, but it had character and charm and the kind of attention to detail that made guests feel special rather than just processed. I started working there on Saturdays, helping with setup for wedding receptions and corporate events. The pay was better than the dining hall, and the work was infinitely more interesting. I watched how the event coordinators managed timelines and vendors, I observed how the front desk staff handled difficult guests and special requests. I studied how the housekeeping team maintained quality standards under pressure. Most importantly, I met people who had built careers in hospitality management, and I asked them endless questions about their paths and their insights. How did they decide which properties to work for? What skills were most valuable? What mistakes did they see newcomers make? What opportunities were emerging in the industry? "You've got good instincts," said Jennifer Park, the hotel's general manager, after I'd been working there for 6 months. "Most college kids just want to collect their paycheck and leave. You actually care about understanding how this all works." Jennifer became my second mentor, though she was much more deliberate about it than Marcus had been. She started giving me small projects beyond my weekend event work. Research competitor pricing for our corporate packages. Create a presentation about guest satisfaction trends. Review our social media strategy and suggest improvements. "If you're serious about this industry," she told me one afternoon as we walked through the hotel reviewing preparations for a large conference, "you need to understand that hospitality is really about creating experiences that people value enough to pay premium prices for. Anyone can provide a bed and a meal. We're selling something much more sophisticated than that." Her words stayed with me as I balanced my coursework with my 2 jobs and tried to figure out what kind of future I was actually building for myself. My business management classes were teaching me theory, but my work experience was teaching me reality. I learned about cash flow and customer acquisition costs and operational efficiency by watching them play out in real time, rather than just reading about them in textbooks. By my sophomore year, I had saved enough money to move out of the dorms and into a small studio apartment in Mission Valley. It wasn't much, 600 square feet with a galley kitchen and a Murphy bed, but it was mine. No roommate to navigate around, no resident advisor checking up on me, no dining hall scheduled to accommodate. Just me and my books and my laptop and my growing collection of hospitality industry magazines. I also started tutoring other students in business math and economics, partly for the extra income, but mostly because teaching concepts to other people helped me understand them better myself. My clients were usually students who were struggling with material that came naturally to me, and many of them were surprised by how much I seemed to know about real-world business applications. "How do you know all this stuff about profit margins and operational costs?" asked Tyler, a junior who was majoring in business but had never worked anywhere more complex than a retail store. "Did you take some advanced class I missed?" "I work in the industry," I explained, though I didn't mention that my industry experience consisted of breakfast shifts at a dining hall and weekend events at a small hotel. You learn different things when you're actually doing the work instead of just studying it. Tyler was impressed enough to recommend me to his friends, and soon I had a small tutoring business that was earning me almost as much per hour as my hotel work. More importantly, it was building my confidence as someone who understood business concepts well enough to teach them to others. During my junior year, Jennifer approached me with an opportunity that would change everything. The Meridian was part of a small hotel group that was considering expanding into digital marketing and revenue management consulting for independent properties. They needed someone to research the market and develop a pilot program. And they were willing to pay me as a contractor to take on the project. "This isn't just a school assignment," Jennifer warned me. "This is real business development work. If you do it well, it could turn into something bigger. If you mess it up, it reflects on both of us." I spent the entire semester diving deep into digital marketing strategies for boutique hotels and small resorts. I analyzed their websites and social media presence and online review management. I studied how they handled direct bookings versus third-party platforms. I researched emerging trends in traveler behavior and booking patterns. What I discovered was that most small hospitality properties were terrible at digital marketing. They had beautiful locations and excellent service and unique amenities, but they didn't know how to communicate their value proposition online. They were losing potential guests to larger chains that had better websites and more sophisticated, Online marketing strategies. My final presentation to the hotel group was 90 slides of detailed analysis and recommendations. I proposed a consulting service that would help independent properties optimize their online presence, improve their direct booking rates, and compete more effectively with larger chains. I included case studies, revenue projections, and a detailed implementation timeline. "This is graduate-level work," said David Chen, the owner of the hotel group, after I'd finished presenting. "How old are you again?" 21, I replied, trying to project more confidence than I felt. "And you developed this entire strategy yourself?" "I had guidance from Jennifer and Marcus, but yes, the research and analysis are mine." David and Jennifer exchanged a look that I couldn't quite interpret. Then David smiled and said something that made my heart race. "We'd like to offer you a partnership to develop this consulting service, not as an employee, but as a co-founder." The partnership offer was modest but real. They would provide initial funding and office space. I would provide strategy development and client management. We would split consulting fees 60-40 in their favor for the first year, then move to 50-50 once the service was established. I said yes before they finished explaining the terms. Rodriguez Digital Solutions launched officially in January of my senior year. Our first client was a boutique resort in Napa Valley that was struggling to compete with larger properties in their area. Within 6 months, we had increased their direct bookings by 35% and their overall revenue by 22%. Word spread quickly in the small world of independent hospitality properties. We added a bed and breakfast in Carmel, a historic inn in Santa Barbara, and a luxury camping operation in Big Sur. Each client taught me something new about the industry and added another success story to our portfolio. By graduation, Rodriguez Digital Solutions had 12 clients and was generating consistent monthly revenue. I was no longer just a college student with part-time jobs. I was a business owner with real clients and real responsibilities and real income. The day I graduated from UC San Diego, my family came down to celebrate. It was the first time they had all been on campus together, and I felt proud showing them around the places where I had spent 4 years building something they knew almost nothing about. "So, what exactly does your consulting company do?" Dad asked as we walked across campus after the ceremony. I explained how we helped small hotels and resorts improve their online marketing and increase their revenue. I described our client success stories and our growth plans for the next year. I tried to convey the excitement I felt about building something from scratch and seeing it actually work. "That sounds complicated," Mom said with the tone she used, when she wasn't sure if she should be impressed or worried. "Are you sure there's enough demand for that kind of service?" "We have a waiting list," I replied simply. David seemed more interested in the business model than the industry focus. "How much revenue are you generating?" he asked, which was exactly the kind of question I would have expected from him. "Enough to support myself and invest in growth," I said, not wanting to get into specific numbers with my family. But the truth was that Rodriguez Digital Solutions was generating more revenue than I had ever imagined possible. We were on track to hit 7 figures in our second year, and I was already thinking about expanding our team and adding new service offerings. Jessica was the most enthusiastic about my success, though I suspected she didn't fully understand what I was doing either. "It's so cool that you started your own company," she said over dinner at a restaurant near campus. "I don't think I could ever do something like that." "You could," I assured her. "It's mostly just solving problems for people and getting paid for it." "But how did you even know how to start a business? They don't teach that stuff in school." "They do, actually, but mostly I learned by watching other people and asking a lot of questions and trying things to see what worked." The conversation reminded me of how different my college experience had been from what my family had expected. They thought I was just getting a degree and maybe making some professional connections. They had no idea that I was building the foundation for something much larger than a traditional career path. After graduation, I moved into a proper office space in downtown San Diego and hired my first full-time employee, a recent UC San Diego graduate named Sarah Kim, who had studied communications and digital marketing. Sarah was smart and motivated and willing to work the long hours that growing a consulting business required. "What's the long-term plan?" Sarah asked during her first week. "Are we going to keep adding clients until we're managing hundreds of hotels? Or are we building towards something bigger?" It was a good question, and one I had been thinking about more and more as our client base grew. Managing digital marketing for dozens of small properties was profitable and sustainable. But it wasn't the vision that kept me working until midnight and dreaming about industry conferences and award ceremonies. "I want to understand every aspect of hospitality operations," I told Sarah honestly. "Marketing is just the beginning. I want to know about revenue management and guest experience design and operational efficiency and property development. I want to build expertise that goes way beyond digital marketing." "So you want to eventually work for a major hotel chain? Or maybe develop your own properties?" "Maybe," I said, though privately I was already imagining something much more specific than that. "I think there are opportunities in this industry that most people aren't seeing yet. Small properties with great locations and unique advantages that aren't being operated to their full potential." What I didn't tell Sarah, what I hadn't told anyone, was that I had been researching Sunset Bay Resort for 2 years. Not obsessively, just periodically checking in on their financial performance and market position. The resort was still beautiful and still expensive, but it was owned by a large hospitality group that seemed more interested in maintaining status quo operations than innovating or improving. Their online presence was dated. Their marketing strategy was generic. Their revenue management seemed unsophisticated. They were coasting on their location and their reputation, but they weren't maximizing their potential the way a more focused owner could. More importantly, the hospitality group that owned Sunset Bay also owned dozens of other properties, which meant Sunset Bay wasn't getting individualized attention or investment. It was just one asset in a large portfolio, managed by people who had probably never spent a night there as guests. I started thinking about what Sunset Bay could become under different ownership. Someone who understood digital marketing and revenue optimization and guest experience design. Someone who could invest in property improvements and staff training and community partnerships. Someone who saw the resort not as one asset among many, but as a singular opportunity to create something extraordinary. By my second year running Rodriguez Digital Solutions, we had expanded beyond digital marketing into full revenue management consulting. We were helping clients optimize their pricing strategies, improve their operational efficiency, and develop new revenue streams. Our client success stories were attracting attention from industry publications and conference organizers. I spoke at my first hospitality conference in Las Vegas, presenting a case study about how we had helped a struggling Napa Valley resort increase their profitability by 40% in 18 months. The audience was mostly hotel executives and property managers, people with decades of experience who seemed surprised that someone my age could deliver insights they found valuable. After my presentation, a woman approached me who introduced herself as Patricia Rodriguez, no relation despite the shared last name. She was a partner at a private equity firm that specialized in hospitality investments, and she was interested in learning more about our consulting approach. "We're always looking for operational expertise when we evaluate potential acquisitions," she explained over coffee in the hotel lobby. "Most consulting firms focus on either the financial side or the operational side, but you seem to understand both." "I think they're inseparable," I replied. "You can't optimize revenue without understanding operations, and you can't improve operations without understanding the financial impact." Patricia nodded approvingly. "We're currently looking at a property on the Central Coast that might benefit from your kind of expertise. Would you be interested in consulting on the due diligence process?" The property was Sunset Bay Resort. Patricia's firm had been tracking Sunset Bay for months, waiting for the right opportunity to make an acquisition offer. The current owners were facing financial pressure from their other properties, and were quietly exploring options for selling some of their premium assets. "It's a beautiful property with an excellent location," Patricia explained, as she showed me financial documents and operational reports. "But the revenue performance has been declining for 3 years, and the guest satisfaction scores are trending downward. The current management seems to be cutting costs rather than investing in improvements." I spent 2 weeks analyzing everything Patricia's firm had gathered about Sunset Bay: revenue data, guest reviews, competitor analysis, operational expenses, capital improvement needs, market positioning studies. It was like getting a master's degree in resort management compressed into 14 days of intensive research. My analysis confirmed what I had suspected for years. Sunset Bay was underperforming its potential by at least 30%. With the right management approach and strategic investments, it could become not just profitable, but dominant in its market segment. "Your recommendations are exactly what we hope to see," Patricia told me after I presented my findings. "Smart, specific, and realistic. We'd like to make you an offer." But the offer wasn't what I expected. Patricia's firm wanted to hire Rodriguez Digital Solutions as ongoing consultants for the Sunset Bay acquisition and management. They would buy the resort, implement our recommendations, and pay us substantial consulting fees for overseeing the transformation. It was a generous offer that would have provided financial security and industry credibility for years to come. It was also the safe choice, the smart choice, the choice that anyone reasonable would have made. But I didn't want to be a consultant on someone else's vision for Sunset Bay. I wanted to own that vision completely. "I need some time to think about it," I told Patricia, though I already knew what my answer was going to be. That night, I sat in my downtown San Diego office and looked out at the city lights while calculating numbers that seemed impossible, but not quite impossible enough to dismiss entirely. Rodriguez Digital Solutions was generating consistent 7-figure revenue. I had savings and investments and equity in a growing business. I had industry relationships and operational expertise and a track record of success. But buying Sunset Bay Resort would require $45 million. I called Marcus, who was now working as a financial analyst for a tech company in San Francisco, but still answered my calls no matter how late I called or how complicated my questions were. "You want to buy a $45 million resort?" he said after I explained the situation. "Maya, I love your ambition, but that's a massive financial commitment. Even if you could arrange the financing, the risk would be enormous." "The risk of not doing it might be bigger," I replied. "This is exactly the kind of opportunity that only comes along once. Perfect location, underperforming operations, motivated sellers, and I have the expertise to fix everything that's wrong with it. And if you're wrong about your ability to turn it around, then I'll lose everything I've built and have to start over. But if I'm right, I'll own something that can't be replicated or taken away." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What do you need from me?" Over the next 6 months, I worked with Marcus and a team of financial advisors and legal experts to structure a deal that seemed impossible but gradually became inevitable. Rodriguez Digital Solutions would be restructured as a holding company. I would take on significant debt financing, but the resort's existing cash flow would cover the debt service as long as my operational improvements delivered the results I projected. The negotiation process was more complex and stressful than anything I had ever experienced. There were inspections and appraisals and financial audits and regulatory approvals. There were moments when the entire deal seemed like it would fall apart over details that hadn't seemed important when we started. But in March, exactly 7 years after my family had left me behind for their anniversary vacation to Sunset Bay Resort, I signed the papers that made me the sole owner of the property. I was 25 years old, and I owned a $45 million resort that my parents had once saved for months to afford to visit for 1 week. The first thing I did as owner was walk through every room, every restaurant, every amenity space, and every staff area to understand exactly what I had bought and what it needed. The resort was still beautiful, but it was also tired in ways that guests probably didn't notice, but I could see everywhere. The second thing I did was call a staff meeting to introduce myself and explain my vision for the property's future. I wanted them to understand that new ownership meant new opportunities, not just new management. "I'm not here to cut costs or reduce staff," I told the assembled team of housekeepers and servers and front desk agents and maintenance workers. "I'm here to make this place so extraordinary that guests will plan their lives around coming back. Here." The third thing I did was begin implementing the operational improvements I had been planning for years. New staff training programs, upgraded technology systems, enhanced guest experience protocols, strategic marketing initiatives, and capital improvements that would distinguish Sunset Bay from every other luxury resort on the coast. And the fourth thing I did was update the resort's booking system with my personal contact information as the owner, so that I would be notified immediately whenever anyone in my family made a reservation. I didn't have to wait long. 3 months after taking ownership of Sunset Bay Resort, I was sitting in my corner office reviewing quarterly performance reports when my assistant Sarah knocked on the door with an expression I'd never seen before. She looked excited and nervous at the same time, holding a tablet that displayed our reservation system. "Maya, you need to see this," she said, setting the tablet on my desk and pointing to a booking that had just come through. "Look at the guest name and the dates." My heart stopped. Rodriguez family reservation, premium ocean view suite, 7 nights, arriving in 10 days. The same suite type my parents had saved for months to afford 7 years ago. The same resort where they had celebrated their anniversary while I worked double shifts at Chen's family restaurant, dreaming about a future I couldn't yet imagine. But now, I wasn't dreaming anymore. I was the owner of the place they were coming to visit. And they had no idea that the girl they had left behind was now the person who would determine the quality of their entire experience. "Should I alert the front desk?" Sarah asked carefully. "I mean, they probably don't know you own this place now." "No alerts," I said, trying to keep my voice steady even though my pulse was racing. "I want them to have a completely normal check-in experience. Nothing special, nothing different. Just treat them like any other guests." Sarah nodded, though I could see questions in her eyes that she was too professional to ask. She had worked, for me, long enough to know that I didn't make impulsive decisions. But she also knew that family situations were complicated in ways that business relationships rarely were. After she left, I sat alone in my office staring at the reservation details and feeling a mixture of emotions I couldn't quite untangle. Satisfaction, certainly. Vindication, absolutely. But also something deeper and more complex that felt like grief for the relationship we might have had if they had made different choices 7 years ago. I spent the next week preparing for their arrival in ways they would never see or understand. I reviewed every aspect of their planned experience, from the moment they would pull up to the valet station until they checked out a week later. I wanted everything to be perfect. Not because I was trying to impress them, but because I was trying to prove something to myself about the kind of person I had become. The resort had been transformed under my ownership, though most of the changes were subtle enough that returning guests might not immediately notice them. The staff training programs I had implemented were producing higher guest satisfaction scores than the property had seen in years. The technology upgrades were streamlining operations and improving service delivery. The menu revisions in our restaurants were showcasing local ingredients and elevating the entire dining experience. But the most significant change was less tangible and more fundamental. The entire property now operated with a level of intentionality and care that reflected my personal investment in every guest's experience. This wasn't just a business I managed. It was a vision I had brought to life through years of planning and months of careful implementation. I had also been living on the property since taking ownership, in a private residence that had been built for the previous owner but never fully utilized. It was a beautiful space with panoramic ocean views and direct access to the resort's amenities. But more importantly, It allowed me to stay connected to the daily operations in ways that remote ownership never could. Living at Sunset Bay meant I knew the names of the housekeeping staff and the preferences of our regular guests and the seasonal patterns that affected everything from restaurant reservations to spa bookings. I understood the property at a level of detail that could only come from being present and engaged every single day. The morning my family was scheduled to arrive, I woke up before dawn and walked the entire property to ensure everything was perfect. The landscaping team had outdone themselves with the seasonal flower displays. The pool areas were pristine and inviting. The restaurants were prepared for the lunch rush that would begin shortly after the typical check-in time. I positioned myself in my office where I could see the main entrance and the valet area through my window. At exactly 2:30 in the afternoon, a silver rental car pulled up to the valet station, and I watched my family emerge into the California sunshine. Dad looked older than I remembered, with more gray in his hair and a slight stiffness in his movements that suggested the years had been harder on him than I expected. Mom was still elegant in that careful way she had always maintained, but there was something tentative about her demeanor that was new. David appeared successful and confident, helping his wife Amanda out of the car with the kind of attentiveness that suggested their marriage was still strong. Jessica looked like the adult she had become, no longer the college student I remembered, but a professional woman with her own sense of style and purpose. They stood together in front of the resort entrance, taking in the dramatic architecture and the stunning ocean views with the kind of awe that reminded me why this property was so special. For a moment, I felt a pang of something that might have been nostalgia for the family vacations we might have shared if things had been different. But then I remembered the kitchen table conversation 7 years ago, and the feeling passed. I watched the valet team handle their luggage with the efficiency and courtesy I had trained them to provide. I observed their check-in process through the lobby's floor-to-ceiling windows, noting how smoothly everything proceeded, and how impressed they seemed by the front desk service. I saw them receive their room keys and the welcome amenities I had personally selected for all premium suite guests. And through it all, they had no idea that the daughter and sister they had excluded from their original visit to this place was now watching their every move from an office that overlooked the entire property. That evening, I made dinner reservations at Meridian, our signature restaurant, for the same time I knew they would be dining there. Not at a nearby table where they might notice me, but at the chef's counter where I could observe the dining room through the kitchen's pass-through window while appearing to conduct business with our executive chef. Chef Martinez and I had been working together to elevate Meridian's menu since I took ownership, and our evening meetings had become a regular part of my routine. But tonight's meeting had an additional purpose that Chef Martinez didn't need to know about. I watched my family navigate the restaurant's sophisticated ambiance with the kind of care people use when they're conscious of being in an expensive place they want to appreciate fully. Dad studied the wine list with the concentration of someone trying to balance quality with cost. Mom took photos of her appetizer with the enthusiasm of someone who wanted to remember every detail of the experience. David and Amanda seemed most comfortable with the upscale environment, probably because David's marketing job had given him exposure to business dinners and client entertainment. Jessica was clearly enjoying herself, but also seemed slightly overwhelmed by the formality of the service and the complexity of the menu options. They were having the kind of elegant family dinner that successful people take for granted, but that represented a significant financial investment for a middle-class family from Riverside. I could see them savoring not just the food, but the entire experience of being the kind of people who could afford to dine at a restaurant like Meridian. The ocean views from Table 12 are spectacular tonight, Chef Martinez mentioned casually as he showed me the evening's specials. That family seems to be really enjoying themselves. Good, I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. That's what we want for all our guests. But I was thinking about how different this scene was from the one I had imagined 7 years ago, when I had desperately wanted to be part of their luxury vacation experience. Now I was providing that experience for them, and they didn't even know it. Over the next few days, I found myself tracking their activities through the resort's various systems and staff reports. They spent mornings by the pool, where our attentive pool staff kept them supplied with fresh towels and complimentary fruit water. They booked couples massages at the spa, where our therapist provided the kind of personalized service that had earned us 5-star reviews on every major travel platform. They played 18 holes on our championship golf course, where our pro shop staff fitted them with rental equipment, and our beverage cart service kept them comfortable throughout their round. They attended our weekly wine tasting event, where our sommelier guided them through a selection of local vintages paired with artisanal cheeses and chocolates. Each activity represented hours of planning and training and attention to detail that I had personally overseen as part of transforming Sunset Bay into the kind of destination that justified its premium pricing. They were experiencing the results of my vision and my work, but they had no way of knowing that. On their 4th day, something unexpected happened. Mom approached the concierge desk with a request that our staff member, following protocol, forwarded to me for approval. She wanted to book a private sunset dinner on the beach for their wedding anniversary, which was happening during their stay. The request touched something in me that I hadn't anticipated. This was why they had originally come to Sunset Bay 7 years ago, to celebrate 30 years of marriage in a setting beautiful enough to match the significance of the milestone. Now they were back for what I assumed was their 37th anniversary, still choosing to mark important moments in their lives at this particular place. I could have simply approved the request and let our events team handle the details. But instead, I found myself getting personally involved in planning an evening that would exceed their expectations in ways they would never understand. I worked with Chef Martinez to design a custom menu featuring dishes I remembered my parents enjoying during family dinners when I was growing up. I coordinated with our wine director to select bottles that would complement both the food and the ocean setting. I arranged for our maintenance team to prepare a private section of beach with comfortable seating and ambient lighting that would photograph beautifully. Most importantly, I planned to oversee the dinner service personally, not as Maya Rodriguez, the resort owner, but as someone whose presence would remain invisible while ensuring that every detail exceeded their expectations. The evening of their anniversary dinner, I positioned myself where I could watch the setup process and the beginning of their dining experience. Our events team had created something magical, an intimate table for 2 positioned just close, enough to the ocean that they could hear the waves, but far enough back that the sand wouldn't interfere with the service. The lighting was perfect, creating warmth and romance without being so bright that it competed with the natural beauty of the sunset. The table setting was elegant but not ostentatious, featuring our finest linens and glassware without making the evening feel overly formal. I watched my parents walk down to the beach together, dressed in the kind of special occasion clothes that people reserve for moments they want to remember forever. Mom was wearing a flowing dress that moved beautifully in the ocean breeze, and Dad had chosen a linen shirt that made him look more relaxed than I had seen him during their entire stay. They were clearly moved by the effort that had gone into creating this experience for them. I saw Mom take Dad's hand as they approached their table, and I watched Dad's face light up with the kind of surprise and pleasure that comes from receiving something better than you expected. The service throughout their dinner was flawless, as I had known it would be. Our waitstaff had been trained to be attentive without being intrusive, present when needed, but invisible when not. The food was perfectly timed and beautifully presented, and the wine pairings enhanced each course without overwhelming the delicate flavors. But what struck me most was watching my parents simply enjoy each other's company in a setting that allowed them to focus entirely on their relationship and their shared history. They talked and laughed and held hands across the table like people who had chosen each other again and again over 37 years of marriage. It was beautiful, and it was exactly what I had hoped to create when I planned this experience for them. But it was also bittersweet in ways I hadn't anticipated, because I realized that I was watching them celebrate their love story while remaining completely outside of it. After they finished dinner and walked back toward the main resort building, I remained on the beach for a long time, thinking about the complexity of what had just happened. I had used my resources and my expertise to create a perfect anniversary celebration for the parents who had excluded me from their original visit to this place. I had given them a gift they would never know came from me, and I wasn't sure how that made me feel. The next morning, I received a handwritten note that had been delivered to the front desk and forwarded to my office. It was from my mother, addressed to the resort management, expressing gratitude for the exceptional service they had received throughout their stay, and particularly for the anniversary dinner that had exceeded all their expectations. "We have stayed at luxury resorts around the world," she had written in her careful handwriting, "but we have never experienced such thoughtful attention to detail and genuine care for our enjoyment. You have made our anniversary celebration truly unforgettable, and we will recommend Sunset Bay to anyone looking for a world-class resort experience." Reading her words, I felt a complicated mixture of pride and sadness. Pride, because her praise reflected the success of everything I had worked to build at Sunset Bay. Sadness, because she was praising work I had done without knowing it was mine, expressing gratitude to an anonymous management team that was actually her own daughter. That afternoon, I made a decision that surprised even me. I was going to reveal myself to them before they checked out the following morning. Not dramatically, not as a confrontation, but simply as a fact they deserved to know before they left. I spent that evening planning exactly how I would approach them and what I would say. I didn't want the conversation to be about the past or about the hurt feelings from 7 years ago. I wanted it to be about the present and about what I had accomplished and about giving them the opportunity to understand who I had become. But as their final morning arrived and I prepared to make myself known to them, something happened that changed everything. Sarah brought me a phone call that had come through the resort's main number, from someone asking to speak with me personally. About a family matter? It was Jessica calling from her room at the resort. "Maya?" she said when I answered, and her voice was shaking slightly. "Is this really you? Are you actually the owner of this place?" My heart started pounding. "How did you find out?" "I saw your name on some paperwork at the front desk when I was asking about late checkout. Maya Rodriguez, owner and managing director. I thought it had to be a coincidence, but then I remembered your business from college, and I looked you up online and..." She paused, and I could hear her taking a deep breath. "You own this place. You actually own the resort where we're staying." "Yes," I said simply, because there was no point in denying what she had already figured out. "Does everyone else know?" "You're the first person in the family to find out." Another pause. "Can we talk? I mean, can you meet me somewhere? Private? I don't want to have this conversation over the phone." 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from my younger sister in a quiet corner of the resort's library, a space I had designed specifically for guests who wanted privacy and comfort away from the busier public areas. Jessica looked exactly like I remembered, but also completely different, the way people do when you haven't seen them in years and they've become fully adult in your absence. "I can't believe this," she said, shaking her head slowly. "When we were planning this trip, when we were talking about how excited we were to come back here, you were already the owner. You were listening to us plan a vacation to your own resort." "I was," I confirmed. "Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you tell us?" It was the question I had been asking myself for days, and I still wasn't sure I had a good answer. I wanted to see what would happen. I wanted to know if you would have a good experience without knowing it was mine. Jessica studied my face, with the kind of attention that suggested she was trying to understand not just what I was saying, but what I meant by it. "And did we have a good experience?" "You did. Your parents' anniversary dinner was one of the most beautiful events we've hosted this year. That was your doing?" "Everything here is my doing in one way or another. That's what ownership means." She was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications of what I had just told her. Then she said, Maya, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Are you angry with us about what happened 7 years ago? The directness of her question caught me off guard, partly because it was so much more straightforward than anything else our family had ever said about difficult topics. I was angry, I said carefully. For a long time, I was very angry. And now I'm grateful. Grateful? She looked genuinely confused. How can you be grateful about being left out of our family vacation? Because being left out taught me that I needed to build my own life instead of waiting for other people to include me in theirs. If you had made room for me on that trip 7 years ago, I might never have started my business. I might never have learned about the hospitality industry. I might never have been in a position to buy this place. Jessica absorbed this slowly. So you're saying that the worst thing we did to you turned out to be the best thing that could have happened? I'm saying that I learned to transform disappointment into determination, and that lesson has been worth more to me than any vacation could have been. But you must have been hurt. You must have felt like we didn't care about you. I thought about how to answer honestly without making her feel worse than she clearly already did. I felt like I wasn't a priority, like my presence didn't matter as much as everyone else's, like I was the expendable one. You weren't expendable, she said quickly. We missed you. We talked about you during the trip, but not enough to find a way to include me. She didn't have an answer for that because we both knew it was true. Jessica, I said gently, I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you because I want you to understand that people can survive being left out, and sometimes they can even thrive because of it. Does this mean you forgive us? It means I don't need your apology anymore. I used to think I needed you to acknowledge what happened and say you were sorry and promise to do better, but I don't need any of that now. Why not? Because I've built something that can't be taken away from me. Your opinions about my choices don't determine my success anymore. Your inclusion in your plans doesn't determine my happiness anymore. I've become independent of all of that. Jessica looked around the library, taking in the beautiful space and the ocean views and the quiet luxury that surrounded us. This is incredible, Maya. What you've built here, what you've accomplished, it's incredible. Thank you. Are you going to tell Mom and Dad and David that you own this place? I had been thinking about that question since the moment she called my office. Do you think I should? I think they deserve to know. And I think you deserve credit for what you've created. And I think it might be more meaningful if they never find out. If they just go home with memories of a perfect anniversary celebration and excellent service, without the complications that would come from knowing their daughter provided it all. Jessica frowned. But don't you want them to know how successful you've become? Don't you want them to see what they missed out on when they didn't support you? I know how successful I've become, I said simply. I don't need their validation to confirm it. We sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the ocean through the library's floor-to-ceiling windows. Finally, Jessica said, "What happens now? Do we just pretend this conversation never happened? What do you want to happen? I want to stay in touch with you. I want to know about your life and your business and what you're working on. I want us to be sisters again, if that's possible." Her words hit me harder than I expected, because I realized that despite everything that had happened and all the independence I had built, I wanted that too. "I'd like that," I said. "Can I ask you one more thing?" "Of course. If we had invited you on that original trip, if we had found a way to make it work financially, do you think you would have ended up here anyway? Do you think you still would have started your business and bought this resort?" It was a question I had never really considered, and it made me think about all the different ways my life might have unfolded if that one conversation at our kitchen table had gone differently. "I don't know," I admitted. Maybe I would have become someone completely different. Maybe I would have stayed close to home and taken a traditional job and been satisfied with a more conventional life. And would that have been better or worse? I looked around at the resort I had built, the staff I employed, the guests I served, the vision I had brought to life through years of hard work and strategic planning. I can't imagine being anyone other than who I am right now, I said. So I guess I have to say it would have been worse. Jessica smiled, and for the first time since she had called my office, she looked genuinely happy rather than overwhelmed. Then I guess everything worked out the way it was supposed to. I guess it did. Maya? Yeah? I'm really proud of you. I know I don't have the right to say that anymore, but I am. You have the right, I said, and meant it. We're sisters. That doesn't change just because time passes or because people make mistakes. As she left the library to rejoin our family for their final day at the resort, I remained at the window, looking out at the ocean and thinking about the unexpected gift our conversation had given me. I had thought I was prepared to reveal myself to my family as the successful owner of their vacation destination. Instead, I had discovered that what I really wanted was simply to reconnect with them as the person I had become. Jessica kept my secret for the remainder of their stay, and I watched from a distance as they enjoyed their final day at Sunset Bay. They seemed relaxed and happy, the way people do when they've had exactly the kind of vacation they hoped for. When they checked out the following morning, I was in my office, but I could see the valet area where their rental car was loaded with luggage and souvenirs. They stood together for a moment, taking final pictures of the resort, clearly not wanting their week to end. As their car pulled away from Sunset Bay and disappeared down the coastal highway, I felt a sense of completion that I hadn't expected. They had come back to the place where they had once excluded me, and they had experienced it as my guests without knowing it. I had provided them with service and hospitality that exceeded their expectations, not because I wanted their approval, but because excellence was now my standard for everything I did. And most importantly, I had reconnected with my sister in a way that felt authentic and hopeful rather than obligated or resentful. That evening, as I walked through the resort conducting my usual end-of-day inspection, I realized that the story I had been telling myself about my family and my success was more complicated than I had understood. I had thought I was building my independence as a way of getting back at them for leaving me out. But actually, I had been building the foundation for eventually letting them back in, on terms that reflected who I had become rather than who I had been when they hurt me. It was a different kind of victory than I had imagined, but it felt more sustainable and more meaningful than anything based on resentment or proving them wrong. The next morning, I received a text message from Jessica with a single photo attached. It was a picture of her family's refrigerator, with my parents' handwritten note about Sunset Bay's exceptional service prominently displayed next to family photos and grandchildren's artwork. Below the photo, Jessica had written, "They're already planning their next visit. Want me to make sure they book the same suite?" I smiled and typed back, "Tell them to ask for the owner's special rate." 2 weeks after my family's departure, from Sunset Bay, I was reviewing quarterly financial reports when my phone rang with a call that would change everything. The caller ID showed a number I recognized from Riverside, and when I answered, I heard my father's voice for the first time in over 2 years. "Maya?" he said, and there was something in his tone that immediately put me on alert. "I hope it's okay that I'm calling. Jessica gave me your number." "Of course it's okay," I replied, though my heart was beating faster than normal. "How are you?" "That's actually why I'm calling. We need to talk, and it's not something I can discuss over the phone. Would you be willing to meet with your mother? And me? We could drive down to San Diego, or if you prefer, we could meet somewhere else." The formality of his request caught me off guard. This wasn't the casual reconnection I had been expecting after Jessica's visit. This sounded serious, even urgent. "Is everything all right?" I asked. There was a long pause before he answered. "We're having some financial difficulties. Significant ones. And after what Jessica told us about your success, we were hoping you might be willing to help us figure out our options. The irony wasn't lost on me. 7 years after they had told me they couldn't afford to include me in their luxury vacation, they were calling to ask for my financial assistance. But I didn't feel the satisfaction I might have expected from this reversal. Instead, I felt concerned about what kind of financial difficulties would prompt my prideful father to reach out to the daughter he had barely spoken to in years. "What kind of difficulties?" I asked gently. "The insurance agency is failing. Has been for the past 2 years, really. But we kept thinking we could turn it around. The business model that worked for 30 years just doesn't work anymore. People buy insurance online now, or through big national companies that can offer better rates than we can. We've lost 70% of our client base." I could hear the exhaustion in his voice, the weight of someone who had built something successful only to watch it become obsolete through forces beyond his control. "We've been using our savings to keep the business afloat," he continued, "and now those are gone too. We're behind on the mortgage, behind on business loan payments, behind on everything. The bank is starting foreclosure proceedings on both the house and the office building." "Dad, I'm so sorry. That must be incredibly stressful." "It is. Your mother hasn't been sleeping. I haven't been sleeping. We keep trying to find solutions, but honestly, we're in over our heads. We don't understand the financial instruments the bank is offering us, and we can't afford the kind of legal help we probably need." "When do you want to meet?" "As soon as possible. This weekend, if you're available." I checked my calendar and found a Saturday afternoon that would work. "Why don't you come to my office in San Diego? I'll have my financial advisor join us, and we can review everything together. Maya, we can't afford to pay for professional advice right now." "You're not paying for anything. Your family." The word hung in the air between us, carrying more weight than either of us had expected. It was the first time either of us had explicitly acknowledged our relationship as something that still mattered, despite the years of distance and hurt feelings. "Thank you," he said quietly. "We'll be there Saturday at 2. After we hung up, I sat in my office thinking about the complexities of family relationships and how success changes the dynamics of every interaction. When I was 18 and financially dependent, they had the power to include or exclude me based on their resources and priorities. Now that I was financially independent and they were struggling, the power dynamic had completely reversed. But I didn't want our relationship to be about power dynamics anymore. I wanted it to be about genuine care and mutual support, the way healthy families should operate. I spent the week before their visit researching debt consolidation options, foreclosure prevention strategies, and small business restructuring possibilities. I also consulted with my financial advisor, Marcus, who had remained one of my closest friends and trusted advisors, even as his own career had flourished in San Francisco. "What are you thinking?" Marcus asked during our Thursday phone call, after I had explained my parents' situation. "Are you planning to bail them out financially or help them develop a sustainable plan to dig themselves out?" "I'm not sure yet. I need to see the actual numbers and understand exactly what they're dealing with." Just remember that throwing money at a structural problem rarely solves anything long-term. If their business model is obsolete, giving them cash to keep it running just delays the inevitable. "I know, but I also can't watch them lose their house because they don't understand their options." "Of course not. Just make sure you're helping them build something sustainable rather than just postponing the crisis." Saturday arrived with the kind of perfect San Diego weather that makes everything seem more manageable than it actually is. I had arranged for the meeting to take place in the conference room adjacent to my office, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown and the harbor beyond. I wanted my parents to see the scope of what I had built, not to impress them, but to help them understand that I was now capable of providing real assistance. They arrived exactly on time, dressed in the kind of conservative business attire that suggested they were taking this meeting very seriously. Mom carried a leather portfolio that looked like it contained every financial document they owned, and Dad had the expression of someone preparing for a difficult but necessary conversation. Marcus had driven down from San Francisco for the meeting, and I introduced him as both my financial advisor and one of my oldest friends. I wanted my parents to understand that I wasn't making impulsive decisions about their situation, but approaching it with the same professional care I brought to any significant business matter. "Thank you for taking the time to meet with us," Mom said as we settled around the conference table. "We know how busy you must be." "Family is never an inconvenience," I replied, meaning it completely. Dad opened the portfolio and began spreading documents across the table. Financial statements for Rodriguez Insurance Agency showing a steady decline in revenue over 3 years, bank statements revealing depleted savings accounts and increasing reliance on credit, mortgage statements for both their house and the commercial property where the insurance office was located, default notices, late payment penalties, and a foreclosure timeline that gave them less than 60 days to resolve their situation. As I reviewed the paperwork, I could see the full scope of their financial crisis. They weren't just having a temporary cash flow problem. They were facing the complete collapse of everything they had built over 30 years of hard work. The business started declining when the big online companies began offering insurance quotes and policies directly to consumers, Dad explained. People stopped coming to local agents because they could get better rates online. We tried to adapt, tried to develop our own online presence, but we didn't have the expertise or the capital to compete effectively. We should have seen it coming sooner, Mom added. The signs were there for years, but we kept thinking things would turn around, that people would eventually want the personal service that only a local agent can provide. Marcus asked questions about their monthly expenses, their remaining assets, and their options for restructuring the business debt. It quickly became clear that the insurance agency was beyond saving in its current form, but that didn't necessarily mean they were beyond help. "Here's what I see," Marcus said after reviewing everything carefully. "The business is not viable in its current form, and continuing to operate it is just accumulating more debt. But you have options for dealing with the personal financial crisis that don't involve losing your house." He outlined several possibilities: debt consolidation loans that would combine their various obligations into a single payment with a lower interest rate, selling the commercial property to pay off business debts while keeping the house, or filing for business bankruptcy while protecting their personal assets through proper legal structuring. "The key is acting quickly and decisively," Marcus explained. "The longer you wait, the fewer options you'll have." My parents listened carefully, asking questions and taking notes with the kind of attention that suggested they were finally ready to face their situation realistically, rather than hopefully. "What would you recommend?" Dad asked. "That depends on what you want your future to look like," Marcus replied. "Are you interested in starting over with a different kind of business? Or would you prefer to focus on securing your retirement and finding employment with someone else's company?" Mom and Dad exchanged a look that suggested they had already discussed this question extensively. "We're both in our late 50s, Mom said. "Starting over with a new business feels overwhelming at this point in our lives. Then I'd recommend selling the commercial property, using the proceeds to pay off the business debts, and focusing on restructuring your personal finances to keep the house. You'd both need to find employment, but that's probably more realistic than trying to rebuild a business in an industry that's changing faster than you can adapt to." It was sound advice, but I could see the emotional impact it was having on my parents. Dad had built Rodriguez Insurance Agency from nothing, and watching it fail felt like watching his life's work disappear. Mom had been proud of being a business owner's wife, and the prospect of returning to traditional employment felt like a step backward rather than forward. "There's another option," I said quietly, and everyone turned to look at me. "You could come work for me." The silence that followed was complete and lasted long enough for me to worry that I had misread the entire situation. "What do you mean?" Mom asked finally. Rodriguez Digital Solutions needs experienced people who understand customer service and relationship management. Dad, you've spent 30 years building relationships with clients and understanding their needs. Mom, you've been managing the administrative side of a small business for decades. Those are exactly the kinds of skills that would be valuable in my company. But we don't know anything about digital marketing or hospitality consulting, Dad protested. You can learn the technical aspects. What I can't teach is how to build trust with clients and how to manage complex projects and how to maintain quality standards under pressure. You already know how to do those things. Marcus was nodding approvingly. It would solve both the immediate financial crisis and provide long-term stability. Plus, Maya, you've been talking about expanding your team to handle the growth you've been experiencing. I have been, I confirmed. I was planning to hire 2 senior consultants anyway. If you're interested, those positions could be yours. What would that mean practically? Mom asked. You'd relocate to San Diego. I'd help you sell both properties in Riverside and pay off all the business debts. You'd start with salaries that would allow you to rent a nice place here while you get established. After you've been with the company for a year and proven that the arrangement works for everyone, we'd revisit the possibility of you buying a house here. Maya, Dad said slowly, that's incredibly generous, but we can't let you rescue us like this. We're the parents. We're supposed to help you, not the other way around. Who made that rule? I asked. Families help each other when someone needs help. Right now, you need help. 7 years from now, maybe I'll need help with something, and you'll be able to provide it. But the positions you're offering, would we actually be qualified for them? Or would you be creating jobs for us because we're family? It was a fair question, and one that deserved an honest answer. Rodriguez Digital Solutions has been growing faster than I anticipated. I genuinely need experienced people who can manage client relationships and oversee project implementation. The fact that your family is a bonus, not the primary qualification. What about David and Jessica? Mom asked. How would they feel about us moving away to work for their sister's company? David lives in Los Angeles, I pointed out. You'd actually be closer to him here than you are in Riverside. And Jessica graduates next month and is planning to move to San Francisco for her first job. Everyone's already scattered geographically. Marcus interjected with practical questions about salary ranges, benefits packages, and timeline for making the transition. We spent the next hour working through the logistics of how such an arrangement might function. And by the end of the meeting, it was starting to feel not just possible, but inevitable. Can we think about it for a few days? Dad asked as we prepared to wrap up. Of course, but don't think too long. The foreclosure timeline doesn't allow for extended deliberation. We understand. As they gathered their documents and prepared to leave, Mom hesitated at the door. Maya, can I ask you something personal? Sure. Are you offering to help us because you feel obligated or because you want to? It was the kind of direct question that our family had never been good at asking or answering, and I appreciated her courage in putting it on the table. I'm offering because I love you, and because I have the resources to help, and because I think we could all benefit from working together, I said. But I'm also offering because I've learned that holding on to old hurts doesn't serve anyone. I'd rather build something positive with our family than spend energy maintaining distance. What about what happened 7 years ago, when we left you out of the vacation? What about it? Don't you want an apology? Don't you want us to acknowledge that we handled that situation badly? I thought about her question for a moment, considering what I actually needed from them versus what I had once thought I needed. I know you handled it badly, I said gently. You know you handled it badly. Talking about it more won't change what happened, and it won't change who I became because of what happened. I'd rather focus on what we can build together going forward. Mom's eyes filled with tears, but they seemed like tears of relief rather than sadness. You've become such a remarkable person, Maya. I'm proud of you, and I'm sorry it took me this long to say so. Thank you. That means a lot. Dad shook hands with both Marcus and me, using the kind of firm grip that suggested he was already thinking of me as a business partner rather than just his daughter. "We'll call you by Wednesday with our decision," he said. "I already know what your decision will be," I replied with a smile. "You're practical people facing a crisis that has a clear solution. You'll say yes." "You think you know us that well?" "I think I know myself that well. I wouldn't have made the offer if I wasn't confident you'd accept it and that it would work out well for everyone involved." After they left, Marcus and I remained in the conference room for another hour, discussing the implications of bringing family members into my business and the adjustments I'd need to make to accommodate their skills and experience. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked. "Mixing family and business can create complications that are difficult to resolve if things go wrong." "I'm sure," I said, "but not because I think it will be easy. I'm sure because I think it's the right thing to do, and because I believe we're all mature enough now to handle the challenges that might arise." "And if they struggle with the transition to your industry?" "Then I'll provide additional training and support until they succeed. I have no interest in setting them up for failure." "What about the power dynamic? You'll be their boss, but you're also their daughter." "We'll figure it out as we go. The alternative is watching them lose everything they've worked for because they don't understand their options. I can't do that." Marcus nodded, though I could see he still had concerns he wasn't voicing. "Just promise me you'll maintain clear boundaries between family issues and business decisions." "I promise." "And promise me you'll give them real work, not just make work designed to justify their salaries." "Marcus, when have you ever known me to run my business based on sentiment rather than results?" "Never. But family has a way of changing people's judgment." "Then keep me honest. That's what advisors are for." Tuesday morning, my phone rang earlier than I had expected. It was Dad, calling from what sounded like their kitchen in Riverside. "Maya, we've talked it over, and we want to accept your offer, but we have some conditions." "I'm listening." "We want to start with a 6-month trial period. If any of us decides the arrangement isn't working after 6 months, we'll part ways professionally with no hard feelings and no impact on our family relationship." "That sounds reasonable. We want our salaries to be based on market rates for similar positions, not inflated because we're family." "Agreed." "And we want clear job descriptions and performance expectations, just like any other employees would have." "Of course." "Finally, we want to pay you back for any money you advance us for relocating and getting established. We don't want this to be charity." "Dad, you don't need to." "Yes, we do. We need to feel like we're contributing to our own rescue, not just being rescued." I understood what he was really saying. They needed to maintain their dignity and their sense of agency, even while accepting help. It was important to them to feel like partners in solving their crisis rather than just beneficiaries of my generosity. "Okay, we can structure it as an advance against future earnings, with a reasonable repayment schedule." Thank you." "When can you start?" "How soon do you need us?" I looked at my calendar and thought about the projects that were already in development and the new clients who were waiting for services we didn't currently have capacity to provide. 2 weeks, I said. "Can you wrap up your affairs in Riverside and be here in 2 weeks?" "We can." "Then welcome to Rodriguez Digital Solutions." After we hung up, I sat in my office thinking about the strange circularity of life and how the people who exclude you from one experience sometimes end up needing your inclusion in something much more significant. 7 years ago, my parents couldn't afford to take me on their luxury vacation. Now I was providing them with the opportunity to rebuild their entire lives and careers. But this time, everyone was included, and everyone had something valuable to contribute. The following Saturday, I drove up to Riverside to help them begin the process of dismantling the life they had built there and preparing for the life they would build in San Diego. The insurance office looked smaller and sadder than I remembered, with outdated furniture and technology that highlighted how far behind they had fallen in an industry that was changing faster than they could adapt. "It's hard to walk away from something you built from nothing," Dad said as we packed up 30 years of client files and business records. "You're not walking away," I corrected him. "You're taking everything you learned here and applying it to something new. All that experience doesn't disappear just because you're changing industries." Mom was going through files with the kind of systematic attention to detail that made me confident she would adapt well to the operational demands of Rodriguez Digital Solutions. "Some of these clients have been with us for 20 years, she said. "I hate that we're letting them down." "You're not letting them down. You're referring them to agents who will be able to serve them better than you can given your current circumstances. That's actually putting their needs first." "I suppose you're right. Besides, in 6 months, you'll be helping hospitality clients solve their marketing challenges. Different industry, same fundamental skill set of understanding what people need and helping them get it." By the end of the day, we had packed everything essential and arranged for a commercial moving company to handle the transfer to San Diego. More importantly, we had spent 8 hours working together toward a common goal, and it had felt natural rather than forced. "Maya," Mom said as we finished loading the last boxes into my car, "I want you to know how grateful we are for this opportunity. Not just the financial help, but the chance to be part of what you've built." "I'm grateful too," I said. "Rodriguez Digital Solutions is successful, but it's also been lonely sometimes. Having family involved will make it feel more meaningful. Even after everything that happened between us? Especially after everything that happened between us. We're getting a chance to create something new together instead of just carrying around old hurt feelings." "I love you, honey." "I love you too, Mom." It was the first time either of us had said those words in years, and they felt both familiar and revolutionary. 2 weeks later, I stood in the conference room where we had first discussed their crisis, watching them review client files and project timelines with the kind of focused attention that suggested they were taking their new roles seriously. Dad was asking detailed questions about client communication protocols, and Mom was taking notes about our project management software with the determination of someone who intended to master every aspect of her new responsibilities. They had rented a 2-bedroom apartment in Mission Valley, close enough to the office that they could walk to work, but far enough from my La Jolla condo that we could maintain appropriate personal boundaries. They were starting fresh in a new city with new careers, but they were doing it together and with the support of family. "Any questions about the client presentation we're preparing for Thursday?" I asked as we wrapped up their first week of training. "Just one," Dad said. "Are you sure we're qualified to be giving advice to resort owners about digital marketing strategies?" "You're not giving advice about digital marketing strategies yet," I replied. "You're listening to their challenges and asking good questions and helping them feel confident that we understand their business. The technical advice comes later, after you've built trust and credibility. And we know how to do that. You absolutely know how to do that." As they gathered their materials and prepared to leave for the day, I realized that hiring my parents hadn't just solved their financial crisis or provided me with experienced employees. It had given our family a chance to rebuild our relationship around shared purpose and mutual respect, rather than old patterns of dependence and disappointment. "Maya," Mom said as she reached the door, "thank you for seeing what we could become, instead of just focusing on what we had failed at. Thank you for being willing to become it." The next morning, I found an email in my inbox from Jessica, who had just started her new job in San Francisco. The subject line read, "Family Update, from the Outside Observer. Maya," she had written, "I just talked to Mom and Dad about their first week working for you, and I have never heard them sound so energetic and optimistic about their future. Whatever you're doing down there, it's working. Also, I'm pretty Sure, this is the first time in our family's history that we've all been genuinely proud of each other at the same time. Love you. Jessica. I printed her email and pinned it to the bulletin board in my office, right next to the photo of Sunset Bay Resort that reminded me where this entire journey had started. 7 years ago, I had been excluded from a family vacation because there wasn't room for everyone, and I was considered the most expendable. Now I was creating space for everyone in the life I had built, and nobody was expendable anymore. It wasn't the ending I had imagined when I was 18 years old and angry about being left behind. It was better. 1 year after my parents joined Rodriguez Digital Solutions. I was reviewing quarterly reports in my corner office when Sarah knocked with news that would reshape everything we had built together. She carried a leather portfolio containing documents that would either elevate our company to unprecedented heights or challenge us beyond anything we had previously experienced. Maya, Coastal Hospitality Group wants to meet with you next week, she announced, setting the portfolio on my desk. They're not just interested in our consulting services. They want to discuss a partnership that would fundamentally change the scope of our operations. I opened the portfolio to find a comprehensive proposal that took my breath away. Coastal Hospitality Group, one of the largest independent hotel management companies in North America, was offering Rodriguez Digital Solutions an exclusive contract to oversee digital transformation and operational optimization across their entire portfolio of luxury properties. The contract wasn't just about marketing, consulting, or revenue management advice. They wanted us to take operational control of their 3 flagship resorts, implement comprehensive staff training programs, and develop a hospitality management institute that would set new industry standards for service excellence and employee development. Most significantly, the proposal included a pathway for Rodriguez Digital Solutions to acquire any properties we successfully transformed, creating opportunities for me to build a portfolio of luxury resorts, rather than just managing them for other owners. This is extraordinary, I told Sarah as I absorbed the full scope of what they were proposing. How did this opportunity come about? Word has spread throughout the industry about the transformation you've achieved at Sunset Bay, she explained. Revenue has increased 48% since you took ownership. Guest satisfaction scores are consistently above 95%, and you've created operational efficiencies that other resort owners want to replicate. But Coastal Hospitality Group used to own Sunset Bay. Why would they want to work with someone who bought one of their former properties? Because they recognize that you succeeded where their management failed. They want to learn from your methods rather than compete against them. The irony wasn't lost on me. 8 years ago, I had been excluded from a family vacation to a resort owned by Coastal Hospitality Group. Now that same company was offering me the opportunity to revolutionize their operations and potentially acquire multiple luxury properties throughout California and beyond. That evening, I called a family meeting at my La Jolla residence to discuss the implications of this offer. My parents had been working for Rodriguez Digital Solutions for over a year, and their expertise in client relationship management had proven invaluable as we expanded our consulting practice. Dad had developed a specialty in operational assessment, conducting detailed evaluations of resort properties to identify inefficiencies and opportunities for improvement. Mom had become our project implementation specialist, ensuring that recommended changes were executed properly and produced measurable results. David joined the conversation by video call from Los Angeles, where his marketing career had flourished to the point that he was considering relocating to San Diego to help manage the expansion that this contract would require. Maya, he said, after I explained the coastal hospitality proposal, this sounds like the kind of opportunity that could transform your company from a regional consulting firm into a national hospitality management corporation. It could, I agreed, but it would also require us to take on significantly more risk and responsibility than anything we've managed before. What kind of risk? Mom asked. We'd be guaranteeing performance improvements across multiple properties simultaneously. If we fail to deliver the promised results, it could damage our reputation throughout the industry. And what kind of opportunity? Dad inquired. If we succeed, we'd establish Rodriguez Digital Solutions as the premier hospitality management company on the West Coast. We'd also create a training institute that could influence industry standards nationwide. Jessica, who had recently graduated and was working as a marketing coordinator for a nonprofit in San Francisco, raised a question that went to the heart of my decision-making process. Maya, is this something you want to do because it's a smart business opportunity, or because it feels like the ultimate vindication of everything you've accomplished since that conversation around our kitchen table 8 years ago? Her question forced me to examine my motivations more carefully than I had initially. Was I attracted to this contract because it represented genuine growth potential for my company, or because it offered a form of poetic justice that appealed to my sense of personal vindication? Both, I answered honestly. The business opportunity is legitimate and significant, but you're right that there's also emotional satisfaction in being sought out by the same company that once owned the resort where I felt excluded. Is that a good reason or a bad reason to accept their offer? Jessica pressed. I think it's a human reason, I replied. And as long as I'm making the decision based primarily on business merit rather than emotional appeal, I don't think there's anything wrong with enjoying the personal significance of the opportunity. Marcus, who had remained one of my closest advisors despite his relocation to San Francisco, joined our conversation by phone to provide financial analysis of the coastal hospitality proposal. The numbers are impressive, he said after reviewing the contract terms. The guaranteed revenue over 3 years would allow you to expand your team significantly and invest in technology infrastructure that would support much larger operations. What about the risk factors? I asked. The performance guarantees are aggressive but achievable based on what you've accomplished at Sunset Bay. The bigger risk is operational complexity. Managing 3 major resort properties simultaneously, while launching a training institute would require capabilities you haven't had to develop yet. Such as multi-site coordination, standardized training programs, quality control across different locations, and probably most challenging, recruitment and retention of qualified staff who can implement your methods at scale. The conversation continued for 2 hours as we analyzed every aspect of the proposed partnership. By the end of our discussion, the consensus was that we should accept the contract, but with modifications that would allow us to phase in our responsibilities over 18 months rather than taking on everything simultaneously. The following week, I traveled to Coastal Hospitality Group's headquarters in Los Angeles for negotiations that would determine the final structure of our partnership. I was accompanied by Dad, whose decades of business experience provided valuable perspective during complex contract discussions, and by Marcus, whose financial expertise ensured that we understood all the implications of what we were agreeing to. The Coastal Hospitality executive team was led by Patricia Chen, a seasoned hospitality professional who had built her career managing luxury properties throughout Asia and North America. She explained that their interest in partnering with Rodriguez Digital Solutions stemmed from recognizing that independent consultants often understood guest needs and operational efficiency better than large corporate management structures. We've been watching the transformation you've achieved at Sunset Bay, Patricia told me during our initial meeting. Your approach to staff training and guest experience design has produced results that our internal management teams haven't been able to replicate. What specifically interests you about our methods? I asked. You seem to understand that luxury hospitality isn't just about expensive amenities and formal service. It's about creating experiences that feel both elegant and authentic, sophisticated but not intimidating. And you think that understanding can be scaled across multiple properties? I think about it sometimes, I admitted, but not with regret anymore. What do you think about it with? Gratitude, not for the pain, but for the motivation that came from learning how to transform disappointment into determination. The award ceremony the following evening was everything I had hoped it would be and more. Standing at the podium, addressing an audience of hospitality industry leaders, I felt the weight of responsibility that comes with being recognized as an innovator and expert. But I also felt the satisfaction of knowing that our success was creating opportunities for hundreds of other people to build careers in an industry that had traditionally been difficult to enter, without family connections or elite educational credentials. 8 years ago, I told the audience, I was excluded from a family vacation to a luxury resort because there wasn't room for everyone, and I was considered expendable. Tonight, I'm receiving an award for transforming hospitality education and creating inclusive pathways for career advancement in luxury property management. I explained how exclusion had motivated innovation, how family dysfunction had eventually generated family collaboration, and how personal disappointment had been transformed into professional purpose that benefited people throughout the hospitality industry. The lesson I want you to take from this story, I concluded, isn't that exclusion is beneficial or that families should hurt each other to inspire success. The lesson is that how we respond to disappointment determines whether it becomes a source of limitation or a source of liberation. After the ceremony, as my family and I celebrated at the resort's rooftop bar, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. We had achieved something that went far beyond professional recognition or financial success. We had learned how to transform our worst shared experience into our greatest shared achievement. Maya, Jessica said as the evening was ending, I want to ask you something that I've been wondering about for a long time. Go ahead. Do you forgive us, really and completely, for what happened 8 years ago? I looked around at my family gathered in this beautiful setting, celebrating achievements that none of us could have imagined when we were sitting around our kitchen table in Riverside, arguing about vacation expenses. I don't just forgive you, I said. I thank you. You thank us for excluding you? I thank you for making a decision that forced me to discover what I was capable of when I couldn't depend on anyone else's support. I thank you for excluding me from something that felt important at the time, because it motivated me to build something that will be important for decades to come. 6 months later, I received a phone call that would mark the beginning of the next chapter of our story. The caller was a representative from the International Hotel Management Association, asking if Rodriguez Digital Solutions would be interested in establishing institute locations in London, Paris, Tokyo, and Singapore. We've been following your work in California, she explained, and we believe your approach to hospitality education represents the future of how our industry develops talent globally. It was an opportunity that would take everything we had built to an international scale, creating career pathways for thousands of hospitality professionals and establishing new standards for service excellence in markets throughout the world. As I considered the implications of such dramatic expansion, I realized that I was facing the same kind of decision that had defined every major transition in my life since that conversation around our kitchen table 8 years ago. I could choose the safe path of maintaining what we had already built, or I could choose the challenging path of building something even larger and more ambitious. The difference was that this time, I wouldn't be making the decision alone. I had a family that supported my ambitions, a team that shared my vision, and a foundation of success that could support whatever risks we chose to take together. Most importantly, I had learned that being excluded from other people's opportunities often creates the motivation to build opportunities that are larger and more inclusive than anything that existed before. The night after receiving the international expansion offer, I hosted a family dinner at Sunset Bay Resort, this time in the private dining room that overlooked the beach, where my parents had celebrated their anniversary 6 years earlier. So, I said as we discussed the London opportunity, it looks like the resort that once represented the vacation I couldn't afford is about to become the headquarters of an international hospitality education company. Are you going to accept their offer? David asked. We're going to accept their offer, I corrected. This isn't just my decision anymore. We're partners in everything we've built together. As we talked through the logistics of international expansion, I found myself thinking about the 18-year-old girl who had sat in her bedroom 8 years ago, feeling hurt and excluded and uncertain about her future. She had no idea that being left behind would teach her how to lead. She had no idea that financial limitations would motivate innovation. She had no idea that family exclusion would eventually lead to family collaboration on a scale that none of us had ever imagined possible. But most importantly, she had no idea that the pain she was feeling would transform into purpose, and that the purpose would create opportunities for thousands of people she would never meet. If I could speak to her now, I would tell her that being excluded was actually the beginning of her real life, not the end of it. I would tell her that the pain she was feeling would motivate her to build something beautiful, and that the family that was excluding her would eventually become her partners in creating opportunities for people around the world. But most importantly, I would tell her that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing that could happen to you, as long as you're willing to transform disappointment into determination and exclusion into innovation. The story that began with a family that couldn't afford to include everyone had become a story about a family that dedicated their lives to ensuring that talented people were never excluded from educational and career opportunities because of their economic circumstances. And that transformation started with learning that sometimes being left out is exactly what you need to discover what you're truly capable of building. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. We think it can be systematized and taught, which is why we're interested in the Training Institute component of this partnership. The negotiations took 3 days and resulted in a contract that exceeded my most optimistic expectations. Rodriguez Digital Solutions would take operational control of Coastal Hospitality's 3 flagship California properties, with full authority to implement staff training programs, guest experience improvements, and revenue optimization strategies. We would also establish the Rodriguez Institute for Hospitality Excellence at Sunset Bay Resort, creating a 6-month certification program for hotel and resort management professionals. The institute would serve coastal hospitality properties initially, but would expand to train managers from independent properties throughout the hospitality industry. Most importantly, the contract included options for Rodriguez Digital Solutions to acquire any properties we successfully transformed, giving me a pathway to build a portfolio of luxury resorts that reflected my vision for what hospitality excellence could become. The financial terms were generous enough to fund significant expansion of our team and operations. But the real value was the opportunity to influence industry standards and create educational programs that would shape the careers of hundreds of hospitality professionals. 6 months after signing the Coastal Hospitality contract, I found myself standing in a completely renovated building adjacent to Sunset Bay Resort that would serve as the headquarters for the Rodriguez Institute. The space included state-of-the-art classrooms, mock hotel suites for practical training, demonstration kitchens for food service education, and residential facilities for students who would spend 6 months learning hospitality management theory and practice. The first cohort of Institute students represented exactly the kind of diversity and determination that I had hoped to attract. They included recent college graduates who wanted to specialize in luxury hospitality management, experienced hotel employees who sought advancement opportunities, and career changers who had discovered passion for the hospitality industry later in their professional lives. Among them was a young woman named Carmen Rodriguez, no relation despite our shared surname, who had been working as a housekeeper at budget hotels while putting herself through community college. Her application essay had moved me to tears because it described experiences that felt remarkably similar to my own journey 8 years earlier. "I have been told that people like me don't belong in luxury hospitality," she had written. "I have been told that my background doesn't prepare me for management responsibilities and that my aspirations are unrealistic, given my circumstances. But I believe that understanding what it feels like to be excluded from luxury experiences actually prepares me to create more inclusive and authentic hospitality environments." Carmen's presence in our first cohort felt like validation of everything the Institute was designed to accomplish. We weren't just training hospitality professionals. We were creating opportunities for people who had been overlooked or underestimated by traditional educational and career pathways. The Institute's curriculum combined theoretical knowledge with hands-on experience, requiring students to rotate through different departments at Sunset Bay Resort and the 3 coastal hospitality properties we now managed. They learned revenue management by analyzing actual booking data and market trends. They studied guest experience design by observing and participating in service delivery. They developed leadership skills by managing real projects with measurable outcomes. But the most innovative aspect of the program was its focus on inclusive hospitality practices. Students learned how to create luxury experiences that felt welcoming rather than intimidating, how to train staff members from diverse backgrounds, and how to develop service standards that reflected genuine care rather than scripted formality. Excellence in hospitality, I told the first cohort during their orientation, isn't about following rules or maintaining traditions. It's about understanding what people need before they know they need it, and delivering that understanding in ways that feel both professional and personal. The transformation of the 3 coastal hospitality properties under our management exceeded everyone's expectations, including my own. Within 12 months, all 3 resorts had achieved revenue increases of more than 30%, guest satisfaction scores above 95%, and staff retention rates that were significantly higher than industry averages. More importantly, the properties had developed distinctive identities that reflected their unique locations and communities, while maintaining consistent standards of service excellence. We had proven that hospitality management could be both systematic and creative, both efficient and authentic. The success of our coastal hospitality partnership attracted attention from hospitality industry publications and conference organizers. I was invited to speak at the International Hotel Management Conference in Las Vegas, where I presented a case study about transforming operational culture while maintaining luxury standards. During my presentation, I explained how exclusion had taught me the value of inclusion, how financial limitations had motivated innovative thinking, and how personal disappointment had generated professional determination to create better experiences for other people. The best hospitality professionals, I told the audience of industry leaders, are often those who understand what it feels like to be excluded from luxury experiences. They bring empathy and authenticity to their work that can't be taught in traditional business programs. After my presentation, I was approached by representatives from hospitality management companies throughout North America and Europe. They were interested in licensing our training methods, partnering with the Rodriguez Institute, or hiring our graduates to manage their own properties. But the conversation that meant the most to me came from a young man who introduced himself as the son of immigrant parents who owned a small motel in rural Nevada. "Ms. Rodriguez," he said, "I've been working at my family's property since I was 12 years old, but I never thought I could have a career in luxury hospitality because I didn't have the right background or education. Your presentation made me realize that my experience actually gives me advantages that other people don't have." "What kind of advantages?" "I understand what it feels like when people assume you don't belong somewhere. I know how to make guests feel welcome even when the property isn't fancy. And I've learned that genuine care matters more than expensive amenities." Those are exactly the kinds of insights that make great hospitality professionals, I told him. "Have you considered applying to our institute?" "I was hoping you'd say that." Conversations like this one reminded me why the Institute mattered beyond its business success or industry recognition. We were creating pathways for people who had been excluded from traditional hospitality careers, and we were proving that diverse backgrounds and experiences actually enhanced rather than limited professional potential. 2 years after the Rodriguez Institute opened, I received notification that we had been selected to receive the International Hospitality Education Excellence Award, recognizing our innovative approach to training and our measurable impact on industry standards. The award ceremony would take place at a luxury resort in Scottsdale, Arizona, with an audience that included hospitality executives, education leaders, and government officials who supported workforce development programs. I decided to bring my entire family to the ceremony, not just because they had supported my professional journey, but because they had become integral partners in everything we had built together. Mom and Dad had evolved from employees recovering from business failure to respected experts in hospitality operations and training. David had relocated to San Diego and now served as our Director of Strategic Development, using his marketing expertise to expand the Institute's reach and influence. Jessica had joined our team after completing a graduate program in nonprofit management, overseeing scholarship programs that made Institute education accessible to students from working-class backgrounds. The night before the award ceremony, we gathered for dinner at the resort's signature restaurant, a setting that felt both celebratory and reflective, given everything we had experienced together over the past decade. "Maya," Dad said as we reviewed the program for the following day's events. "I need to tell you something that I've been thinking about for months." "What's that?" "When you first offered to help us with our financial crisis 3 years ago, I thought you were being generous with family members who had made mistakes. Now I realize you were actually recruiting partners who could help you build something much larger than anything any of us could have accomplished individually." "I was doing both," I replied. "But you're right that working together has created opportunities that none of us could have pursued alone. Do you think we would have ended up here anyway, even if we hadn't gone through the crisis that brought us together professionally?" I considered his question while looking around at my family, all of whom had found meaningful roles in an organization that had grown far beyond anything I had originally envisioned. "I think we would have remained a family that cared about each other, but operated as separate individuals pursuing separate goals," I said. "Working together has taught us how to combine our individual strengths into collective capability." "And the original vacation situation?" Mom asked. "Do you still think about what might have been different if we had included you 8 years ago?"